Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by David Kepron, who is the Vice President of Global Design Strategies at Marriott International. David, pleasure. Thanks very much. You've just come off the main stage, a tremendous session, covered a lot of ground. It felt like it could have gone on forever.
It could have. That's what we were saying earlier, is that the ability to talk about the brain in 30 minutes and make it concise, and it becomes somewhat contrite when you do that, is impossible, I think. However, one of the great things is that we're talking about it, because I think this space, the retail space, hospitality, brand experience space, doesn't talk about what's going on inside people's heads. You know, I think we've always thought that the world of experience is out there. It's in the stuff, it's in the places, it's in the materials and finishes, it's in those interactions in the store. But really, it's 100% inside our head.
Yes.
And it's manufactured.
And your mind state is very different on certain different need states.
Sure.
And certain different occasions. And
sure.
Even in exactly the same place.
There are sort of things that are constants, but
yes.
I think what we normally say is expectation sets change, not just in terms of what you're doing or where you're doing it, but they also change within the context of the cohorts of shoppers or people who are buying your experiences want. My 17-year-old son's a very different animal than I am in terms of what he expects, in terms of how that engagement is supposed to unfold.
Now, first of all, out of interest, how do you merit, how are you defining yourself, if you can, in this strange world that we live in? A retailer, a hospitality, experience brand? What's the overarching set you put yourself in now?
It used to be that we were the world's largest hospitality company. We have over 7,000 properties around the world, 30-plus brands. Our footprint is big. And we've changed that to begin to think about being the world's favorite travel company. And that's a very interesting change, because when you move from simply being a hospitality company that builds hotels and gives you restaurants and a good night's sleep to being the world's favorite travel company, it opens up the world of possibilities that recognizes that travel isn't just about the hotel stay. It's about everything that you do from the moment you decide to get on your way to the hotel, the things that happen after the hotel, and the interaction, the touch points that you have, the food and beverage pieces, and what it's like to move from your door to our front door is really instrumental in setting up the experience for when you're on a property, how that experience unfolds. So the world's favorite travel company really sort of opens the doors to a lot of opportunities that we might not have considered in the past.
And within that context, because your role's a really interesting role in that redefinition, where do you sit within the organisation? I don't mean physically, but in terms of the influences, designing a hotel is could be a 6-7 year process. Where does it all sort of gel?
It is actually a longer process, and certainly longer than the retail world. I spent 20 years in the retail design world prior to coming to Marriott.
Well, we've all been on that store walks, haven't we? 3 days before the store opens, and see it. I don't like that. Change it, you know.
I've merchandised. I've spent all night long merchandising baby booties and canoes, you know, in the same store. So I know what that's like. Our global design strategies, it really sits at a position that's really intriguing, because our role is to sort of work at the 36 to 50,000 foot sort of overview of how a brand experience should unfold on a property from the world of design, architecture, design. So we touch everything that you would touch, the places and the things, and we think through those engagement opportunities and how the expression of the brand comes to life in architecture. As a result of that, of course, when you get to a property, you're dealing with the CX team, the operations team, the food and beverage team, the brand group, the IT people, because all of those things coalesce on a property, where it probably is the first place where all of those things finally come together. The connection between those nodes should be seamless, right? You can't have a beautiful piece of architecture and something technological doesn't work, or an engagement with an associate that is discontinuous with, you know, my arrival, where they seem to not care. So we're really working across those things, but fundamentally we're structured to set up what this place should be like. I always say to all the other guys, the other verticals or disciplines in our company, whatever you all think about eventually ends up in my world in a place or a thing. And what I need to do is try to make sure that the strategic direction for how that should come to life is really clear.
And given the number of brands that you have, and clearly the number of geographies you work in, how do you define each of those brands in a way that then helps you articulate, well, this architecture, this combination of technology is great for this brand, but not
Correct.
at all good for this brand over here.
Yeah, well, there's a heft of research for starters, right? So we really understand the guests well. We understand the demographic qualities, psychographics, who and what they're about, and we build sort of narratives around that persona that are clearly articulating what they're driving towards in terms of an experience, or what their need states would be when they arrive on property, and how we can solve those things. When you get to the design side of saying, okay, well, let's say given these core pillars of the brand. Let's use Westin as an example. Westin is, the guest is, we call her the achiever, driven, really mindful, interested in well-being. The brand, the design aesthetic is based in something called biophilia, which is designing with nature, and a sense of mindfulness or mindfulness practice, because that gives you a sense of calm in your body, which helps you get to that place of well-being. And we say, okay, well, given those two things, how do I articulate that in the chair? How does that become obvious when you walk into a lobby that you can say, oh, yes, this is a place that drives the wellness message or the well-being message? And that's my job, to try to figure out what are those visual, architectural, design, food and beverage cues that support that key message for the brand and that support the need states of the guests.
And how, in doing that, do you relate with the other functions? So you have the operators, and you say the food and beverage has all got to gel together. So at that stage of the articulation and then working out, well, actually, what does it physically mean? When do those other key parties of the project also start getting involved?
It's a little known fact, maybe, I think, or surprising for most of the people who I talk to, and say, we have over 7,000 properties. We own a little bit, like 1% of those properties, let's say. We manage a whole lot more, but we're really working with franchise scenarios and owner-operators and management teams who aren't necessarily our own folks in terms of being in the building. And that's an intriguing opportunity, because now all of a sudden we need to rely very heavily on our in-continent teams. So meaning the Southeast Asia group, or the Asia, the MENA group, the CALA, Europe. And there are a bunch of architects and designers in there who are highly skilled at what they do, and they take what I create strategically and say, okay, Mr. Owner and Mr. Owner's architect or designer, here's the plan that we need to follow, and they're instrumental in helping us execute, because I can't be at all those properties all the time, and they may be working on 30 different projects at once, whereas I work on 7 brands and really clearly articulate over a period of time what I'm working on in a very different schedule. They're working fast and furiously. Our view is much more long range. And the thing is, you said before, building a hotel takes a long time. It is not something that happens overnight. So that integrative process between those disciplines is critical, so that on day one, you're not doing what you suggested, which was running around. Now, the truth of the matter is that sometimes we are running around, because that just happens, and that's the world of architecture and design, and things sometimes don't let you get quite as easily open as you hope, but we always get there. And so we have, again, other teams who go to properties and they train the staff. They're working with, the opening teams are instrumental in making sure that all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted.
And what's the connection now between, I suppose, the architectural physical manifestation and then the personal interaction that happens within the property itself? How do you make sure that those are in sync?
It's a brilliant question. And doing hotels is not for the faint of heart, I will say, right? It's
that's a bit like retail. So.
But it is for retail. Yeah, no, but I think any place where you're considering these branded interactions, or interactions and relationships that are mediated by some brand idea or product or stuff or experience, they're not easy to do.
Because frankly, my overriding impression of a property is always the people interaction.
Sure.
That's the ones that.
And I think it could, and that's it's brilliant, because it is true that it really doesn't matter, I think, in the end. Well, as an architect, I'm schooled to believe that architecture is what really matters, and the rest of it could probably go away, and people would be moved to, transcendent experiences simply through architecture. But the reality is, because I think you've also experienced this, doesn't matter how good the stuff is. If your interaction with the associates or the people who are engaging you in, like, the ambassadors of a brand, If that doesn't work well, then the resonant sort of memory of that also is could be quite damaging. That you would remember that bad interaction amongst all the other things that might be good. So those personal relationships are critical. Interestingly, I think what we're seeing now is the emergence of digital technologies that's sort of, in some cases, removing that interaction opportunity from the front desk where we have mobile check-in and keyless entry, which is think.
And is that a good or a bad thing in the round?
I think it's good in that it facilitates check-in. It gets those people who either have the inclination or maybe the acumen to want to interact with people, get them right to their room, make that seamless and easy, and they're on their way. I think it's potentially a challenge because I believe that key moment where you meet someone who's able to remember your name, to create eye contact, they set a cadence for expectations about the engagement, and the relationship that is really critical. We're built in Mr. Marriott, and the company for years has lived by the acumen of associates first. Treat your people well, and they'll in turn treat your guests well. And that is something we live by every day,
Now technology is unbelievably pervasive in every single aspect of our life, and in a hotel property probably more so these days. Again, how do you balance what things you're going to put in from a technological perspective, the speed with which everything's changing, when you have to sign stuff off in that 6, 7, 8 year type of a process, and that balance between the physical and the digital?
This is a world of fascination for me. I'm fascinated both with the pace of change and how technology is so quickly changing. The deltas between significant technology changes are becoming increasingly smaller, which will keep us perpetually in this try to catch up mode. Strategically, it means that you can't live on a strategy that gets you incrementally closer to your guest because that guest is moving exponentially further away. So every link I build, they've moved away 3.
Plus, they're having experiences with other brands,
correct?
So they're expecting to manifest themselves.
So, long-range view, appreciating the necessity to engage digitally, and digital, I think, where it becomes really intriguing as I talk about my 17-year-old Ben and his relationship to digital media is fundamentally changing his brain, because I think it rewires the way he expects interactions to happen. And the facility with which he makes digital content is also becoming a mediator of experience, because he expects that what he does creatively here in the palm of his hand should translate to those other interactions he has. So what does that mean for us as a hotel company who builds things that we don't change for 7 or 14 years? We build architecture, and that doesn't go away. But his world is more transcendent. Things move transiently through his life. His experiences come and flow from, and there's not a very long stop in his world.
It's a non-linear.
It's a non-linear, correct. So we're looking a lot at the use of AR and VR and digitally mediated experiences that are, by the way, you can argue that digital is disconnecting, and there's lots of research that suggests it is. However, there's a rise in the digital world that's suggesting that we can use digitally mediated experiences, immersive digital, to create sensory-based experiences that really are what people want in the end anyway, right? The sense of emotion, that sense of a feeling that drives their memory of that moment. And digital is a great tool to be able to do that. But I think it's really changing the way we look at how the cadence of renovations should happen, because we're trying to keep up with a culture that is just moving faster and faster, and who, by the way, are not a one-size-fits-all generation.
Sure.
They, used to be in the retail or hospitality spaces. Here's the product. Hope you like it. If you don't like yellow sweaters this season, come back. We'll have blue. Right. Well, that's not the way my son works. My son expects the ability to interact directly, and when you do that and you offer the opportunity for him to help narrate the experience, to create a narrative where he builds himself into the expression of the brand, it becomes inherently more interesting for him as well, because it's not just I'm a consumer of a thing or an experience. I'm a participant in the thing or the experience, and that for him resonates at a much deeper level, builds long-term memories and engagement opportunities that are not so transient, because the residual memory is longer. That I am empowered to take part in this. That means, I think, that we're looking towards digitecture, where the digital world,
a nice phrase.
It is. I love the world of digitecture. And one key thing that I talk a lot about is an idea of technempathy. Technempathy, a phrase I created, is this idea that technology in the service of empathic extension. That if you're using technology to get closer to guests, to build a relationship, to grow that bridge, then it's very useful. If you're not doing that, then it's highly, its effect is sort of suspect,
Yes.
and will not last for a long time.
That's an amazing challenge for you.
It is. It's extraordinary.
We could carry on talking on this forever, but unfortunately, the grim reaper of time has paid us a visit.
I hate when that happens.
Thank you very much indeed.
You're very welcome.
Great.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed.